before we go into so many of the different concepts, I know with your book, Gilded, it's all about helping high achievers and workaholics like myself. I think I'm recovering, but I think a lot of people don't label themselves as that. So they might be listening into this podcast and they're like, you know what? This isn't really for me. So I'm just curious, for someone listening in who has that mentality, what would you tell that person? And why do you think this conversation is going to be so important for them?
You know, originally I wanted to call this book Workaholics Anonymous, and then I thought about it. It's not really Workaholics Anonymous. It's Effortholics Anonymous. What I mean by overachiever does not mean people who achieved above and beyond career-wise, which is what most people associate high achievers with, right? And before that, grades. What we're really talking about here are people who are obsessively or intensely focused in one particular direction. And we all know somebody who's taken, for example, the gym a little too far, parenting a little too far, tulip growing a little too far. In other words, they're really capable of exceptional focus. That exceptional focus tends to lend itself to perfectionism, and perfectionism is the actual problem. So I'm delighted that you said that. I know, because the book's been out for a month now, that a lot of people have called me or DM'd me by saying, and they started by saying, I didn't think it was for me. And then I read 2 pages and I was like, uh-oh, that's me. So I really encourage you to keep an open mind and see if it resonates with you, because then the work is for you.
100%. And, you know, from your work, you've coached hundreds, thousands of people, have done so many talks, right? You've worked with Olympians, celebrities, executives, tons of founders. So I'm curious, what would you say would be some of the red flags of warning signs of people being like, you know, they might have it all, but not really feel fulfilled?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. The first is actually, the first area is much more obvious, and that is they're not actually getting the results that they want. They're hitting against some kind of ceiling. So their results are not satisfying to them. So even though they look like they have it all, they don't feel like it because, I don't know, they're still a best kept secret in their industry. Their business traction is not where they really, really want it to be. They're, still single, for example. In other words, their actual visible results are off. And that is between them and them, but they do see this. This is physically appearing. The second sign is emotional, is how you feel is just incongruent with what your life looks like on Instagram. I like to say that there are feelings that most of us ignore. We usually numb that feeling with, 7 hours of cat videos on Instagram or shopping or other forms of isms. Mm-hmm, but they are feelings like restlessness, aimlessness, jealousy. You know that one? Jealousy.
Yes.
Anxiety, lying in bed at night worrying that the other shoe is going to drop. Real crippling judgment of others, judgment of self. Those are emotional states. And those are emotional states that basically mean that 3 out of 5 exchanges in your life are a little bit painful to you. And most of us think that it's kind of low grade, so I don't really need to look at it. And my job is to say, you should look at it. Because why would you have good when you can have fabulous?
Keren, what you said, it resonates so much with me. So many things that you brought up. And one thing that really stands out is judgment. I've noticed even for myself, I judge myself and I'm so hard on myself. Even right now, we were just sharing, I kind of stepped into this podcast with a really busy kind of hectic morning, not feeling 100%. And I'm so hard on myself and just keep apologizing to you that I'm not at my core. So there's so much I feel like we can dig into there. And if someone's listening in and feel like, yeah, I do feel that way. I also feel hard on myself. And maybe that's also a layer of perfectionism, right? How do we stop these thoughts and feelings? Because whether you're working for someone, whether you're starting your business, whether you're a mother, like it can show up in so many ways.
Well, we have to do the work. I'll take you there. But first, I want to unpack what you're talking about. You're beginning to dance around the last topic, the main or dominant theme of our last conversation, which was imposter syndrome. By the way, this is something that I listen to your podcast, as you know, religiously. It comes up again and again and again. Even when people are not using the same words or the same nomenclature or classification, they are still talking about the bottom line, lingering resistance to claiming all that we deserve and having real trouble owning that we really do deserve happiness. We really do deserve success. And as a result of that, we make ourselves basically sing for our supper. We got to earn success because I don't really deserve good things. I got to work my butt off for really, really good things. We overwork, we over effort in every direction. And that leads to perfectionism. Perfectionism is when we take it just a skosh too far. Essentially implementing what Brene Brown called that fictitious measuring stick, that yardstick that you have to lean up against and measure up against. And if you ever weigh a little bit more, have a little bit less in the bank account, have a little bit of a flip-flop, get some criticism, you start taking it out first and foremost on yourself. You just beat yourself up for not being at 100% all the time. Here is the beginning of the solution. Number one, accept that you're human and everybody else is too.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as perfection. This will never work out for you. Give it up. Number two, be willing to do the work again and again and again. I created the book for my former clients, for people like you. I want you to have me at your bedside so that you can renegotiate the contract with your psyche again and again. You think that you defeat the ego one time and he just goes away? Don't you remember, Yasmin, when I told you that the ego is union? He's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You can't fire him. Your job is to learn how to dance with this harshness. It's to learn how to question this darkness, to learn how to meet it with, is that true? Should I be beating myself up right now? Are things really bad? Is there any other way to see this? And if there's any other way to see this, is there an opportunity here? We are renegotiating with ourselves again and again and again. And that, I'm happy to tell you, is lifelong work.
It's so true. And it's interesting. Like once you think you've worked through something, there's nothing better than life that is like, nope, you got to work on a different aspect. So like you said, it's a lifelong practice, and having books like yours, on our bedside to always revisit, and having some kind of ritual is so important. And what you said, and I'm just underscoring this because I feel like it could resonate with people. I was just having this conversation with my husband. I'm like, gosh, I'm feeling out of it today. And it's like, we have to remind ourselves, like you said, we're human. We're not robots where every day we can be a 10 out of 10, and it's like, how can we just show up, do our best, still be fulfilled? Because this game of life is so long that, if you had an 80% day today, it's not really going to shift things in the long run. But one thing you mentioned, which I also love, and it kind of reminds me of what we're talking about right now, is you said that many high achievers push through stress and exhaustion because it's always worked for them, right? Like they force their way through. That's how we did in high school, college, maybe your first few jobs. So it's something that a lot of people feel like works for them. But you say, what got you here won't get you there. I can't say how true that is, especially as a business owner, and how things are, you really have to shift. So can you talk to us more about that?
As a business owner, you learn pretty fast that if you
you
want to
do.
keep playing this game, you are going to burn out. You're going to burn out fast. And by the way, most people do. Did you know that only 12% of female business owners make it to year 2?
I get so angry hearing that.
That's a BHS statistic. That's a real BLS statistic, Bureau Labor statistic. And I, for one, cannot stand for it. And it's because most people use just their dominant drive to really hustle towards something, and they lunge themselves at the wall and then they blow up. And that then creates a facade or a vision of failure, which scares a lot of people, and then they don't try again. Instead, what if you decided to be, more normal and thought a little bit more long game? Gilded is designed to help you start to play the long game, to slow you down to play the long game, because what got you here will not get you there. Now listen, first I want to say to everybody out there, if you don't want to stop hustling really, really hard, don't worry. Life's going to stop you. And if you don't believe me, try hitting 45. Try hitting 55. Life will stop you. This is a law of nature. Nobody can go at that level forever. And again, I've coached Olympic athletes and celebrities and really, really fancy CEOs and founders. This is law. So, and by the way, the more highfalutin, the more the person's convinced of their own infinite power, the faster they're going to have a health issue. So I'm not a fan of this, and I definitely do not recommend it. I also think it's a very punishing way to live. So hopefully you'll exhaust yourself even before a disease, God forbid, or some other traumatic incident does. The second thing I want to say is, once you understand this, you'll also be able to perhaps be open or receptive to a very important principle I'd like to teach you, which is, most people who are working extremely hard are actually playing not to lose. They're not playing to win. Here's what this means. I'm going to explain the concept to everybody through the greatest movie of the last 10 years. And I know you will agree. It is the movie Crazy Rich Asians. obsessed, as you know. That movie opens and ends with game theory. It opens and ends with a game. In the beginning, she's playing poker, our protagonist, Rachel Chu, against her teacher's assistant. He has a really good hand. She has a really bad hand. But then she notices that he's hesitating. What does she do? She moves all her chips to the middle of the table. What does he do with a really good hand, Yasmin? Do you remember? He folds. He folds a really good hand. This is a perfect metaphor for how most people are playing the game of life, the game of business. They will fold a good hand. And then she explains why he did this. She said because he thinks he's playing with his intellect when he is in fact playing with his psychology. Our psychology, our human psychology, the way our brain is wired, is so averse to loss, so loss averse, that it would rather fold a good hand than go all in on itself. The only way to go all in on yourself is to play against your psychology, which means to learn to think slowly, to learn to think non-reactively. This is the exact opposite of what got you here. What got you here was big bursts of energy and blowing up, which for some reason was okay with you. I get it. It was okay with me too until I hit 38 and I was like, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. And then I started to learn that actually playing the long game, learning to think properly, learning to really optimize and align with myself and my worth before showing up for anything was going to deliver far, far greater results. And that's the process right there.
Gosh, it's gold. And I think what you're saying, it's so true that so much of business or doing anything, that you want in your life is playing with your psychology. I say that all the time. It's like, we're not the smartest people in the room. It's staying in the game and being consistent. Like all the women on my podcast, people that you also coach, like they've been doing it 15 years, 20 years, are all friends of ours, or just like us. And it's like, what is the biggest differentiator is they are constantly working, like you mentioned early on that ego every day, on their psychology. And I think that is the magic piece of really being consistent and doing anything great, whatever that looks like for you in your life.
I couldn't agree more. I think that if you're a business founder and you're not in coaching, I don't know what you're doing. I really don't understand it because this is a psychological game. I don't think any of us is more talented than the other. I truly believe talent is a dime a dozen. I think that consistency and real focus with your mindset, real nurturing of your mindset, it's what gets you there. There are just no secrets. I've done this long enough to know this is really a mindset game.
I'm sure you get this question a lot, but there's so many people that I talk to and probably people listening in who they don't take that next step. They have this idea or they want to start this side project or a business. And like you said, the amount of women, what was it? 12%?
12%, yes. Oh, and by the way, the numbers of women who make more than 6 figures in their business, I don't even want to share that with you. I don't want to upset you.
No, I'm already
All right,
upset.
I'm just going to tell you. It's 2%.
Yes, that's crazy. I thought it was over 1 million. It's 2%. Is it 6 figures?
Over 1 million. Yeah, over 1 million. You're right.
Over 1 million.
Right.
Yeah,
over 1 million. It's
crazy.
2%. And that's the last BLS statistic that we have. That's insane.
I know. I feel like this is my small version of making an impact, but in my future, I'm like, we got to change this, whatever we need to do. But to that point, and I also actually know some men as well who kind of stop in their own tracks. But for someone listening in who is like, I have this idea, I've been thinking about it for 5 years, they can't get started. And they think about this grand plan. And I think what you said about perfectionism, it truly holds so many people back, which I know is like a huge part of your book and so much of what you talk about. But what would you tell that person? Like, how do you get that person kind of just off the tracks and just go for it and test things, which is so much of getting anything off the ground?
I wouldn't tell them anything. It's none of my business. But here's what I would say about perfectionism so that they understand what they're up against. What they're up against is actually a fear of making a mistake or a fear of failure. And in particular, in perfectionist cases, what's really happening is actually a terror of making a mistake. This idea that if I do the wrong thing, if I take the wrong move, it will be catastrophic. And to them, I say, you've got to be kidding me. Watch any entrepreneur around you. This is not a life sentence. A mistake is at worst a delay. It is not a life sentence. And if you start to understand that, and you understand that failure is part of the game, you can at the very least start to orient yourself towards the work that will allow you to break past this analysis paralysis. And that work is self-worth work or self-compassion work. This is very deep work. I highly recommend doing this with a really seasoned coach, and not just with the books, because again, we're outside of your own echo chamber, so we can actually probably show you where your defaults are lying. At the same time, it's pretty simple work. It's the learning of, I think above all, the ability to self-soothe, the real ability to treat yourself the way you would treat a child. I don't know about anybody else, but it seems very counterintuitive to me to be mean to a child.
Yeah.
Don't you agree? It would be absolutely impossible to be mean, especially to a baby. And people forget that in their head, their psyche, you're a baby and you're speaking in a terrible, terrible way to a small child. You have to get in the habit of speaking to yourself really kindly. There are two ways to do this that I talk about in the book. One of them is learn how to literally speak generally to yourself, not in specifics. Specifics are in scores, in numbers, right? Here's how much sales I made. Here's how much I weigh today. Here's how many calls I have. This is nonsense, but this is how high achievers speak to themselves. Speaking generally is, nothing needs to happen this red hot second. It's not urgent. It's okay. Help is on the way. I've done some things okay before. I might do a couple more things better. There is still time. Those are general, open-ended phrases that we have to learn to speak to ourselves. Like if you fell and you got a boo-boo, your mom would not usually say, "Oh my God, idiot, get up." She would say, "It's okay. It's okay. Help is on the way. You're going to be okay." Right? The second is, I actually keep, and it's in the book, a picture of myself at 18 months old in the book. It's adorable. I was the fattest, cutest baby ever.
I can imagine.
And every time I have the impulse, and I still do, Yasmin, I still write my own emails, right? Like a lunatic, because I just love to do it. And that means typos.
Yeah.
And then I read them and I go, "Oh God, you don't deserve to live," which is a very, very old-timey Keren just coming right back into action, right? And then I just look at the baby picture and I go, "It's okay. You didn't do anything wrong. You're okay. You're going to be fine. They'll forgive you." And they always do. P.S. Most people don't notice.
Yeah. That's what you realize too.
Exactly. And so finally, after all this process of self-compassion, hopefully you'll just find yourself, perfectionist that I love so much who are listening to this. You'll find yourself in a friskier place. You'll find yourself a little bit more ready to take a chance, more ready to go back out there and find love, more ready to go back out there and create a business you love, more ready to get back out there and start again.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think so much of it and what you just mentioned is that self-worth and self-compassion that you have for yourself. And that's also what I've noticed kind of on my journey. And it wasn't until I left my corporate job, started BIA, where so much of myself has been exposed, which is like the beautiful aspect of starting anything different and new and challenging. So I think what you said, that self-worth, self-compassion piece is so big, and self-soothing is huge, right? Like, I mean, everything you're saying, I'm so glad, again, you wrote this book because more people need to know this. And, it's just how can you manage your psychology with everything?
That's right. And because otherwise, let's just be clear, otherwise what people will be running on forever and ever is a form of repression. And that form of repression will make you very Machiavellian. It will make you assume that you're in a dog-eat-dog world and you have to continue to maintain this facade forever. Otherwise, you are going to lose your dominant position in society, which is essentially the game you're playing. I always say, if you want to continue to do this, you will become a shark, and even worse, you'll be surrounded by sharks. This is no way to live. I am not in the business of helping you become a better shark. I'm in the business of helping you become happy. I don't think success is worth anything without happiness. As a matter of fact, I believe that success without fulfillment is ultimate failure. And hopefully, those who are ready to have it all are really ready to hear a different kind of message.
And I love that you brought that up. I want to talk more about it because that's kind of been my quest in life and why I started the podcast. Like, I know it exists, that you can be successful and be fulfilled and be a happy person. That's my goal and why I do what I do and why I love you so much. So let's talk about that, because I think you're right. So many people might think success equals war. I know Sarah Blakely said that. She's like, I remember when I was starting Spanx, I was in a group of men, CEO group, and they're like, "Good luck, business is war." And she's like,
Business
"Yeah,
is war.
I don't want to live that way." And so I'm curious, for someone who's listening in, is it possible to have that success and personal fulfillment in their life?
Yes, not only is it possible, but I don't think anything else is sustainable. I understand that there are some gentlemen out there who are totally okay with selling their soul and living in a Faustian bargain forever. I feel very, very sad for their souls. It must be horrific to live in that shadow. Instead, you should hold yourself to a higher standard. You should actually ask for happiness, for true success to present itself in your life. Two things have to be true. Number one, you have to be living on your purpose. You have to really understand what your purpose is, what you were born to do, and you have to have the courage to do it. And number two, it has to produce fulfillment. That is inherently the definition of purpose, but it has to produce fulfillment. If it is not, if the life that you have been working so hard to build has not produced fulfillment, then I'm sorry to tell you, you are off the path. It means you have climbed the ladder, but you never bothered to check what wall you had put the ladder on. And it's time to remove that ladder, literally go all the way back down, just like in Monopoly, go back to step one and remove the ladder and put it on a different wall. And I know that sounds horrible. And again, because of people's loss aversion, they're like, no, I'm not starting over. I'm good. I promise you, it'll be worth it. Gilded is the story of how I took a torch to my entire life. And yeah, it was very painful, very difficult for a while. But my God, if you saw the size of the blessing that was coming, you would go gladly.
I have goosebumps. I know we talked about this in our first podcast, but maybe you can kind of take our listeners through what you were going through, because it's so deep, and to see where you are today is, I think, a great example of everything you're talking about.
For those who don't know, I am as fancy as I look. I grew up really smart and with a very nice family, and I was socialized to maintain the appearance of being really smart and really good and doing everything right. Now, this is not particularly unique. Most people in all societies, I have clients from Jeddah to Sydney, they all have these benchmarks, right, that you need to reach to be considered really, really good and really upstanding. I checked all of those marks. I went to the right schools. I was an officer in the army. By the end of my 20s, met and married a tall man, which, as we all know, is the holy high kahuna of accomplishment. I say that laughingly. I'm in a C-suite position at a very big billion-dollar luxury conglomerate. I have it all. And by the way, I live in the nicest house I've ever seen, and all my pictures on Instagram are super chic because I'm usually wearing Prada, and my husband almost always matches his outfits to mine. Hashtag dream life, right?
On paper.
You're laughing because you know the story. The truth is, it was all a sham. It doesn't mean that the business was not real. It means that the marriage was abusive. I was terrified almost every day. That house was very nice, but it was in Zurich, which I like to call the city that never stops stopping, the exact opposite of where a New Yorker belongs. It was gloomy and miserable, and I hated it. I really didn't like the job. It's not that the job was not a good job. It was lovely. It's just wasn't for me. This is not what lit my heart on fire. This was not what I was born to do. I didn't even get to sleep with my cats. My husband kept throwing them into a different room. So basically, I'm living a lie, a complete lie. And by the way, all that Prada was credit card debt. That was complete nonsense that I was using to social climb, to maintain my status, to always look like I'm caught up with the Joneses, or ideally, slightly a little bit better than them. It's an aggressive and horrible way to live. And then one day I found myself in the shower, listening to ABBA's My Love, My Life, which is their only sad song, and thinking that my only way out of this misery was to kill myself. As all overachievers do, I took it out first and foremost on myself. You messed up. You ruined everything. This is your only way out. And I got really lucky. I don't know why, but I just snapped out of it. Maybe it was something about Frida and Anieta's voices. I snapped out of it. I got out of that shower. And I don't remember very much about that day, Yasmin, but I do remember having one very clear thought, which was, this ends now. This ends now. I had no idea where I was going next, how I was going to do it, what the next looked like. But I did know I'm not playing this game anymore. This is not good enough for me. This is not good enough for me. And from there, I went through a few years, first of just finding myself and getting through. I mean, a divorce that ended up with just absolute economic destruction. I had to leave that job to go back to New York. I couldn't find a job for several months. I then put my stuff in storage, which famously burned to the ground. So I lost all that Prada.
Forgot about that. That's right.
And then both of the cats
Shoot.
died.
Oh,
Now, this is
Karen.
all in a 6-month span. And I'm sleeping on a friend's couch because I'm broke and I don't have anything going on for me. This was the absolute bottom. And then I realized something fantastic. What's great about rock bottom is you got nowhere left to go but up. And this is when the amazing self-help books and business books start flooding my house. I really didn't even know what I was consuming at the time. But little by little, my mindset begins to shift. And I start feeling, instead of depressed, frisky and eager. And it was enough for me to really get back on my feet and then little by little build a completely different life. And here we are.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about all those details. It's a lot to go through. And I know you dedicated a whole chapter in your book about the importance of praying for a shitstorm. So I know you chatted a little bit more about it, but there's so much that's been going on for people's lives. I feel like just this year, at least in LA and certain parts of the world. But can you maybe walk through your thoughts on why are challenges actually a gift?
They are a huge gift because, like I said, sometimes you're just not willing to stop. You're not willing to face what you need to face. And the good news is the universe, or I don't know, whatever you believe in, will stop you. It will stop you. You will have to confront it. It's kind of like any form of addiction. And by the way, workaholism of any sort, efforting of any sort, is an addiction. After a while, it catches up, doesn't it? There's nothing they can do anymore. You have to admit that you have a problem. And that's why I think that ultimately we reach a point where we're very, very grateful for big problems, because we know, those of us who are very trained at this point, that this would not be happening if there wasn't something that I really needed to pay attention to now. You know what I mean? I know a lot of people, they don't really like a marriage crisis. They don't really like a health crisis. My mom definitely wasn't very excited to receive her cancer diagnosis when we were together last. But it always means, look at me, stare me in the face, deal with me. And by the way, she's 4 years free and clear. Can you believe it?
I'm so happy to hear that. It's so true. I feel like you just even reflecting back on my life, any challenge, even to this day, is really what makes me snap out of it. I'm like, all right, I got to do something about it. And like you said, some of us are lucky to do that before there's a health diagnosis or something so serious. So having that awareness throughout the way, there's a beauty in being frustrated. The way I say it is like being frustrated with something is when all the ideas for the business come. I'm like, we can't be doing this anymore. And what can we do? I can't live like this anymore. And there's always a beauty that comes from it.
Which is why today I'm so much more attuned to my feelings. I know before things happen, I'm starting to feel bitter. I'm starting to feel restless. I'm starting to feel jealous. I'm starting to feel aimless again. Boom. Keren, it's time to go. It means that whatever is here is done, and you have to face the fact that you're ready to go to the next level.
I love that. And I think I never had that connection with myself back in the day, but what you mentioned, just that quiet space and you really understanding your emotions to be like, oh, why do I feel that resentment, that anger, that frustration? Like, okay, that means we got to mix something up, whatever that is. Like, we cannot keep doing the same thing that we've been doing.
It literally means stop and move. What is that? What is the line from Vanilla Ice? Stop something and listen. I love that song. Ice,
yeah, there you
ice,
go, baby. I love it. And we're talking about anger. I know you talk a lot about also in your book, breaking up with anger. And that's interesting. Actually, we don't talk too much about anger, I think, as like an emotion, at least on this podcast, but I think it...
Yeah, because we're not men, but you got it too.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, but we still have it in a different kind of capacity. So why is that such a common emotion for high achievers? And how do we release that anger that we were just talking about?
Anger is what fuels most of us for the first half of our life. And it appears in two forms that will actually resonate with you probably better than anger. The first is competition or competitive drive. A lot of people are like, yeah, I am competitive, but I'm not angry. And I'm like, well, where do you think the competition comes from? I can and I will. It's a zero-sum game emotion. And it's a very good gateway emotion because it gets you out of victim into something that feels a little bit better. Unfortunately, if you get stuck here, if this is what you're using again and again, man, is this going to blow up for you. Competitive energy is combustible. It never lasts. And the second form of it is the one that most of us are very, very familiar with now that we have social media, and it's righteousness. Righteousness is I'm right and you're wrong. And if you don't believe that that affects you, then how do you think the algorithm gets you? The algorithm knows exactly what you believe to be true and shows you something that's going to make you angry. Anger is going to keep you scrolling again and again. Now, I'm very lucky, Yasmin, in this sense, because the only things I really like are self-help and cats.
Yeah.
And they don't usually upset me. But for those who are really interested in the news, politics, geopolitics, for those who are really, really interested in, the Real Housewives, anger is what's getting you again and again. Righteousness is what's getting you again and again. And if you want to truly be happy, that will be one of the last gateways that you cross with my book, Gilded, because we're going to show you how to break up with anger and at very least convince you that nothing you want is on the other side of it. It's really not a useful emotion.
It's so true. And I feel like it will just cap your potential for anything that you want in your life being in that. I don't follow the news, but I did have a little sprint where I was on Twitter, X, just on top of and the algorithm just was bringing, I was like, I need to delete the app. This is not, yes. I'm like, this is not
trying to kill you. It's literally trying
literally,
it's very bad for you.
I know. I'm like, thank God I don't really follow the news to that level. But it's amazing. I'm like, there's no way I could show up, do the podcast, run my business, be a happy person if that was something.
Yeah, but it's even like, look at the wellness industry now. They're trying to piss you off too. Like,
it's fear mongering.
It's fear mongering. So we have to start understanding we are extraordinarily susceptible to this. Once again, it's the default of the brain to be afraid because the brain is not designed to make you happy. The brain is designed to keep you alive. To keep you alive, the fastest way to keep you alive is to keep you scared so that you're constantly in defense mode. Kind of like my mother. My mom, very well-meaning, very nice person, never wants me to leave the house. And if I do leave the house, never with wet hair because I will get pneumonia and I will die, and her neighbor once died from it, so I have to be afraid. Essentially, that's how your brain operates. It's very well-meaning, but it's crazy. Don't listen to it.
Gosh, it's so true. And it sounds like my mom as well. And I'm like, I'm trying to unwind all this. Please don't call me. I'm going on a walk. She's like, watch out behind you. Someone can drive next to you and throw you in the butt. I'm like,
exactly.
Mom.
I heard somebody died on a hike the other day. I know. I know.
You got to live your life. But what's interesting is having that, I know you talk a lot about scarcity, versus abundant mindset. And I think, whether we grow up with those, I don't even know if they're called limiting beliefs, like more fear-based beliefs, I don't think that is what can allow you to really prosper and blossom in life. So how do we get away from that? Whether it's, social media like you talked about, or family members or friends who might be thinking that way. If someone's listening and they're like, gosh, that resonates so much with me. How do I break away from that? Because so much of my thoughts are fear-based.
Well, let's take it piece by piece. And everyone is welcome to read the first 2 chapters of the book that take a really deep dive on this. The first problem is that most of us have a worldview of scarcity, a scarcity worldview. This is not a new concept, but the very basis is, do you see the world as a hostile place with limited resources where we're all competing for them? Or do you see the world as a wonderful place with infinite resources that we can all share and kumbaya around? Now, there are a lot of optimistic people, particularly where you live, LA, who completely believe that they are abundance thinkers. Adorable. No, you're not. And here's why you're not. You're very likely to have already cultivated a scarcity or a dominant scarcity mindset because of 2 things. Number 1, your physical body. Your physical body has limitations. It's taken beatings. You are aware of the existence of time, of the effects of time, of well-being, and of your limitations of your power, right? And as a result of that, you will naturally see the world in a little bit more finite terms. Number 2 is cultural conditioning. This begins with your parents, and it ends with teachers, peers, and Instagram, who all exacerbate this notion that actually the resources are finite. Thank you very much. And look at those people. They're on vacation in Greece and you're not. Look at that business founder. They have all the clients and you don't. You have less clients. Them having more client is me having less client. Them having more husband is me having less husband. In my case, them having more cats is me having less cats. Now, then I want you to really start to break past this by understanding the first thing. The first thing that you need to understand is that cannot be true because there are abundant resources. And then you just want to play a little bit of a logical game with yourself and understand that no one is trucking resources from other planets, as my favorite teacher likes to say, Esther Hicks. But yet, The universe is continually expanding its resources. The economy continues to expand. In my lifetime, the internet appeared out of nowhere. In my lifetime, Justin Bieber appeared out of nowhere. In other words, good things continue to happen on this planet. And as I like to say to single people, people get divorced every day. Don't you worry. In other words, the resources are always replenishing. So you can always just play a logical game with yourself here to get yourself to abundance just by realizing that you are not thinking from abundance about the thing which is causing your heart pain. The second level will be to identify your limiting beliefs. Your limiting beliefs have been formed over a very long period of time. Most of them are absolute nonsense, and you're not even aware of how nonsensical they are. But they are things that usually appear very reasonable for you to say. For example, there are no clients. The economy is very bad. Things are really tough right now. There are no good men. With due respect, every single one of those statements, while it may appear to you to be relatively true in this moment, are absolute nonsense. They could never hold up in a court of law. When you start to learn the process to basically just take the air out of these, and there are several that are offered in Gilded. The very famous ones are The Work by Byron Katie, for example, Active Insight by Andrew Bernstein, my own pause principle that I shared last time in our last episode, encouraging people to go back and listen. They're very helpful because they really help you dismantle these, take the air out of these, reframe them, and then be able to keep moving forward. And then the practice of switching from scarcity to abundance really is just a practice. That's all it is. I've learned to do this in my sleep at this point. I just go 1, 2, 3, and I switch modes. That's all.
I love all that, and I completely agree. And I think also the words that you use are so important. Like you mentioning just a few, like I felt tense already when you were just giving examples of like, you know, what were you saying? Like there's no opportunity for me, or there's no men out there, or
other people are succeeding more. Look at what's happening. Most business owners are constantly obsessed with what other product people, other service people are doing. And they don't even notice that subconsciously that jealousy or that weirdness is only coming because they somehow believe that more for you equals less for me. This is a complete fallacy. Run your own race. You know, one of the things you mentioned, Sarah Blakely, one of the things I truly admire about her was that she made a decision very early on that she was not going to go after any of the copycats. Do you know how many copycats there are? Just try looking for Spanx on Amazon anytime. And what do we still call them, whether we buy them from Triumph or we buy them from her? We still call them Spanx. In other words, the dominance of her understanding of the value of her brand is indisputable. That is what I want for every founder out there. And that's how you build an empire, baby.
It's so true. And even, you know, I'm sure there's so many people that don't think this way, but then whenever I kind of question myself, like, why am I doing all this work? Why is it so important? It's like, oh, I actually want to create something that's so different compared to the average person. So I'm just sharing, like, if somebody's listening, like, oh, why should I do this? There's so much to do. It's like, if you want to create a truly fulfilling and amazing life, everything that you're talking about is just so important. And it will take time, right? It's not like a 1 month, 2 month, like you said, it's a constant practice, and life is always challenging us in different ways. But yeah,
that's true. But even a coaching series is 4 months. And that kind of sets you up for life. It's so interesting because I'm in the coaching space, the coaching speaking space. I mean, there's so much competition here, and I always don't understand why people are so obsessed with it, why they're falling for the sales gurus who are like, make 7 figures in 1 year. This is absolute nonsense. The only thing you should really care about is what Yasmin just said, mastery. I want to create something better around here. I want to create something so spectacular that it really doesn't matter what else is out there. If the customer is looking for exactly the right fit, I will be that exact right fit. That's really what you want. What you want is to be exceptional, not to be all dominant, which will never happen.
Exactly. And I'm going to kind of go back to one thing we were talking about, the power of fulfillment, and how, you know, it's important to find that in your work to really, you know, build sustainability and happiness in your life. And this is something I think about a lot. You know, there are tough moments, right, in business, or you learning something different, or having a challenging conversation with an employee, or, you know, something happens inevitably in life. Those days you don't necessarily feel the fulfillment, right? Like, you have tough moments where you still have to show up and self-soothe and go through the psychology aspect and show up as a business owner or whatnot. How do you define fulfillment?
Fulfillment is satisfaction with what is and eagerness for more. Did you notice I didn't say satisfaction with what is and absolute obsession with more? The real problem, the crux, is the relentless pursuit of more. You know, the tagline to my book ends with the relentless pursuit of more. I think this is the Achilles heel of all overachievers. It's never enough. It's never enough. It's never. This is ultimate anxiety. Imagine marrying the person of your dreams and then thinking, I don't know, is this the best I can do? Well, guess what? That's a thing. It's also a thing with business. I want you to reach a place of such deep understanding of yourself and such deep understanding of what you came here to do that you are genuinely happy with every meal you eat and you're just eager for more of this rather than more from outside. Outside will never, ever, ever meet your standards. I always say to people who are like, well, maybe I do need a different partner. Different faces, different places. But unless you fix yourself, you are bringing the same garbage energy to someone, I don't know, mildly hotter. Ultimately, what you really, really want to do is find deep satisfaction within yourself. And it feels like, that's what it feels like, satisfaction. It genuinely feels like, I ate this meal, it was fantastic, I'm good now. That's fulfillment.
Mm-hmm. And how does gratitude kind of tie into that?
Gratitude is exactly that. It's the ability to truly feel appreciation for what you've experienced. If I'm sitting in my bed with my fantastic sheets, you know I'm obsessed with sheets, and I'm thinking, I don't know, is this really the right thread count for me? This is a little scratchy. I'm not happy. Instead, if I bask in, this is the best sheet stitch I've ever had. I can't believe how crisp these sheets are. I'm so amazed by how happy I am in these sheets. That's gratitude. It's a deep state of appreciation of what is.
Exactly. I love that so much because I think you know, we've both of us have gone through this in different ways. Like you mentioned, you had the best job, on paper, the best marriage, you looked great. Like I also had the best job or whatnot. Or even in business, it's like once we hit this revenue, everything is going to be great.
Everything's going to be okay.
And
once
it's like
everything will be magically amazing. Oh, come on.
Exactly. And you just keep hitting these targets in life until you learn, like you said, sometimes it just takes that lesson to keep coming for you to learn, like, oh, it's not these pillars because it's going to keep changing. So it's actually the journey, the fulfillment, the gratitude, and pausing throughout all that to have some awareness, like, oh, I'm so grateful I get to talk to Keren today. You know, despite it being a more difficult day, how lucky am I to have this opportunity to chat with someone? And I'm reframing all the time, like I get to do this. So I have a question. You obviously coach so many people, you meet with so many people. What are some of the key words that are more negative, limiting beliefs that people say that they might not notice? Because I notice,
yeah. Indications of sloppy thinking. Great. So there are a couple that really get my goat. One of them is overwhelm. One of them is ambition. All those words are just an indication, and again, this is going to be a little controversial, of sloppy thinking. You're just overusing your energy, and you're giving yourself an excuse to not deal with it by naming it something that it's not. By the way, anxiety too, it's massively misused. My very good friend, Dr. Ellen Vora, talks about false anxiety versus real anxiety. And real anxiety is real different from false anxiety or misdiagnosed anxiety. It's really important to use these words very sparingly, not because they're not accurate sometimes, but simply because they are a way of speaking defeat on your life. They're a way of boxing you into a position that really doesn't serve you anymore. Ambition does not serve you if it's hard and painful. It's only serving you if it's delicious and all about the I get to do this feeling. That's wonderful and supercharged. Overwhelm is really a choice because at any given moment you can take a break. And if you believe that you can't, then I'm really sorry about the next time you get the flu. But you are just not that irreplaceable on the planet that you cannot take a tiny little baby break. Everybody can. And to think opposite of that is to not give yourself the grace to be human. So those are the words that really get my goat. I don't know if those were the words you were looking for, but those are the words that when people use them, and they use them very often, I go, okay, now let's work with that.
Yeah, no, you're right. I didn't even think about that, but it makes complete sense. It's like the vibration around those words are not benefiting the life that you want to live, or even like I notice I have to catch myself when I go, oh, I should have done that. Oh, I should do this.
Should. Oh, yeah.
Should. Yeah.
Those are different. The word should, the word need, any urgency words are really antithetical to your soul. By the way, they usually drive you directly to a limiting belief because should is almost always wrong.
I love that. Like these little things that you just can become more aware of actually can make such a difference in how you speak. And slowly the thoughts will change. And also, let's talk about thoughts. Clearly, people can have thoughts that they might not be true, but it comes up sometimes for yourself. How do you kind of move through those thoughts? Because sometimes I also notice myself and I try to catch it. It's like, why am I thinking that way? That's such a limiting belief, Yasmin. And then I'm like going back to judgment, right? So
yeah, then you start beating yourself up. So stop with that. Just stop with that. Give me an example. Let's
see.
coach real time.
I know we're doing real time coaching. Let's see. Maybe
Try
I
should. Try a should statement.
I think even coming, before this podcast, we talked about a little bit early on. It's like, dang, I'm not feeling 100%. Like I should be feeling better. Like why do I feel
So
this
the feeling is I should be at 100%. I owe this to my audience. I owe this to my friend. I should be at 100%. Number one, is that true? You should be at 100%. Now it feels true. To a lot of people would say I should be at 100%. For example, a lot of motivational speakers will say, I just took a whole bunch of money from this company. I should be at 100%. I need to deliver. I signed a contract. Here's question number 2. Is it 100% true? Would you be able to uphold this belief in a court of law? The answer to that is actually no. Now I like to inject a third bonus question that's actually an overwrite of the system. Let me give you 5 reasons, or give me 5 reasons for which you shouldn't actually be at 100%. Number 1, you're human. Number 2, sometimes being not at 100% produces much, much bigger magic. I personally loved it when I came on a podcast a couple of days ago, and the guy had been crying for 2 hours and had a really big trauma. And I was like, this is perfect. This is a much better time to talk. This will actually be useful to your audience. It's way more useful to other people to see you in vulnerability and to be able to reflect through that than to see you at 100% and ready to go. That's just not real. Number 3, you know what? Let's say that you're not at 100%. It's an opportunity to reframe, take some time off, and revisit a little bit later. What's the big deal? Nothing happened. Number 4, this is a great opportunity for you to learn that not being at 100% won't kill you. And number 5, there is still time. So who cares? Even if you completely royally mess up right now, who cares? There is still time. The 5th one is really important. You're not at 100% and you need to own it. You need to own that, you know what? You're not feeling it just because you're not feeling it. And you allow yourself to be the kind of person. This comes back to that feeling of deserving that women need to cultivate and female founders need to cultivate. I deserve to have a hissy fit right now. Thank you very much. Yes, because we've all been conditioned to be so nice and so good and so perfect all the time, which is just a lie. It's a lie that cannot be maintained. So it's my hope that you come through this and then you ask yourself the next question, which is, who are you being when you believe this thought? I should be at 100%.
Not a human being, not anyone nice to myself at all.
You're being mean.
And it feels like that way. Yeah, it feels that way.
And you're being punishing, and you're being defeatist. Who would you be without the thought? Last question.
I would feel a lot more free.
That's the word.
And it's like, I want to show up as myself, like you said. So who cares if I'm not 100% all the time? Even for team or, life stuff, it's like, we're all human, like you said.
And that's the whole point of the work. The whole point is to break free. I like to say that as long as you're living out of obligation, you are a slave. Again, overachievers don't like thinking of themselves as slave. But if they've actually built a life that has made them more of a slave than more free, which is why all of us begin businesses to begin with, then with due respect, you've just boxed yourself into a fancier golden cage. And what's the point of that?
Yeah, I remember early on with Bia, I felt that way, I think we work together. I've been working on my mindset and everything. And I'm like, there was a moment where things were really difficult very early on. I was like, oh, I've kind of taken the blueprint of my corporate life and now it's in my business. I'm like, so I'm the common denominator. Like, it's not the world. It's, I've taken the playbook of what worked for me here, and I'm still unhappy. And I'm like, all right.
No, actually, it's much worse because now you're your own boss and you're a complete nut job. I know. Exactly. And this is why I really think your job is in that moment to go, That's not why I started this. And it's my responsibility to have a different experience around here. So let's do this.
100%.
Let's do it
And
right.
there's so much that you can do to break it. And I love that your book is called Gilded. It's like, it's,
I mean,
it's
the
like,
big gold cage, you know?
I love it. It's like we are creating that gold cage around us. Like it's us. It's no one around us. It's typically, the overachiever, your thoughts, your relationship with yourself, everything. So
You're locking yourself in. You're holding the key, and you're the one who has such terrible loss aversion. You're not willing to just turn the key and break out.
it's so true. And another question that I have, you mentioned also in the book that your purpose and your job doesn't always have to be the same thing. And I want to talk about that because maybe someone's listening in and they're like, you know what, I don't really have that fulfillment or purpose in my day-to-day job, but it's a reality of my life. So what would you tell that person?
It's not your job's job to give you your purpose. Purpose is neither legacy nor title. And that's what's so problematic to people. They don't understand that your purpose is not what you do, it's how you do what you do and what components of what you do light you up. My job is not my purpose. A lot of people have said to me, Keren, you found your calling. Look how wonderful. Oh, magnificent. And I say, I could have found the exact same calling through interior design.
I was going to say, we talked about this when we met. What would you be doing? You're like, I love interior design.
I don't know. I love cats so much, like to a freakish degree. I am an uplifter. I like teaching. I enjoy organization. Those are purpose streaks. Real purpose streaks are that which you love doing so much that time ceases to exist when you are doing it. It really produces a state of flow, and the outcome is a state of meaning, real appreciation, a sense of service to the world. That can come through anything. You just need to understand what particularly lights you up about that which you do, not that which you do is your life's purpose. I hope that makes sense to you. I dedicated all of chapter 7 to this because it's such a huge topic. It's so important. And I included so many exercises because I really think clarity in this dimension changes all of life.
I love the clarity is everything. And also when you were just talking, the thought that came up to my mind about is you don't know sometimes what your flow is until you put yourself in different situations. So like even going back to what we started in the beginning, getting over that perfectionism, getting over that hump, like putting yourself in so many situations to feel like, oh, this actually feels good when I'm leading a team meeting, or, oh, I get to create XYZ. So at least for me, different experiences in my outside of my comfort zone is what allowed me to fine tune that and eventually start my business with Bia.
Yeah. Trial and error. Remembering what you were like before the age of 11.
That's true. I love that.
Remembering what you genuinely love, allowing yourself to love things, and then also removing the perfectionism from the answer itself. Many people come up with weird answers and then they judge the weird answer and then they change it immediately to something that would actually work as a profession that paid money because their conditioning is so aggressive in that direction. When I started to do the exercises in my own book, many years ago, I remember thinking that the only thing that came to mind that I genuinely just love more than anything is talking. And then I immediately dismissed it because I thought, what the hell do I do with talking? And then I thought about all the people I adore, comedians, actors, speakers, teachers. What do? They just talk. They're communicators. They love to write. They love to speak. They love the spoken word. They love writing. What if that actually directs me, I thought, in the way of my actual true path? And I'm really glad I did. So there are lots of different ways to get to this, and I hope I included several of them in the book, but clarity around this will change your life, for sure.
Yeah. And the exercises that you have and really taking the time is how you can break through with that clarity. So if you're confused, so many things to do and why you have your book. And I'm going to end on one last question to ask. What's a question you wish more high achievers would ask themselves before chasing that next big thing or that next goal for them?
Why do I want this? I think a lot of people in the overachieving seat ask when, how, maybe what, but they don't ask why. It's really important to stop and ask why. Why does this matter? Instead of getting caught up in life, especially so much so that you've lost any semblance of meaning, start getting back to it by really examining what you're doing and asking why.
I love that. And I think also not taking other people's opinions of things, like even thinking for myself, everyone's going to be like, oh, when is Bia going to do this? Why don't you do this? And everyone has opinions. And I've gotten to a place where it's like, what works for me? What brings me that feeling of fulfillment? Like we are just doing what we want to do and making the impact. And there's so many different ways we could do that if we listen to others. I wish my younger self knew that, because I did really listen to other people's opinion. But,
it's okay. She was young. She was young. But living a brave life, living a free life requires a fundamental understanding of your preferences and a fundamental understanding of your why. And it cannot be anybody else's why. If I asked my mother for her why, in respect to having children, in respect to living the way she's lived, she has those ideas and she would love to impose them on me. But they are not my why. They don't resonate with me. And if it doesn't, then I have to have the courage to live the way I want to live. Because I don't think there's any other way to live, honestly.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that you said living a brave life. And I'm curious, outside of the work that you do, it seems like you've really nailed down many practices. Do you have a community or people around you who are living a brave life that you think really helps you continue to step into that every single day?
Yes, I've made the best decision a person can make, the most important decision a person can make, and that is I married the right person. I don't think anyone is braver, more enlightened, more wonderful than Ryan. My husband is truly an example of a person who's free, and that's just a joy to live with. My grandpa, Warren Buffett, as you know, says that the dumbest decision you can make in life is marry for money. I think the dumbest decision you can make in life is do anything for money. I think you should marry things that you truly love. You should do things that you truly love. And that's the most important decision you'll make, because you'll usually find other people and other endeavors that are enlightening. And that's what this whole dance is about. I know that not a lot of people will do that. Like, we still live in a, as Madonna said, material world, right? And many people will still make pragmatic choices. If that's your level, that's fine. That's great. If it works, it works. But it didn't work for me, and I'm so glad. And that is literally it. Now, of course, you also have good friendships and good communities, etc., etc. But the most important decision for that kind of level of understanding and that kind of reciprocity or back to you is who you marry.
Oh, I feel like we should do a separate podcast about this. Like, could not agree more.
I don't talk about it enough in Gilded, and I was actually just thinking about the sequel. The sequel I want to write is Gilded Relationships that look golden but don't feel like it. I really could not believe more in the importance of relationship for you to open up to truly you in this lifetime and to your mission in this lifetime. And you got to get that right.
Yeah. And I don't know if we can, I know we are going over time a bit, so this is probably a lot we can talk about, but I'm just curious for anyone listening who's like, I would love to find that partner. I want to find someone who is as supportive. I know, you were in a relationship that didn't work out. You got divorced. You met Ryan a little bit later in your life. I know there's
many
so much
years later. Yes.
Yeah. So I just want to underscore, like, you've really done the work as well to eventually
That's right.
have found him.
I've dated every man in Manhattan. I know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah. So what advice, if someone's listening in and they're like, man, I really want to have that kind of relationship, what should I start doing today?
You've got to do the work to know who you really are and to own who you really are, because anything false that you bring to a relationship, any false demand that you bring to a relationship will produce chaos. Taking the time to know who you are is not only fundamental for business to work out, but it's absolutely essential for a real relationship to work out. And like you said, Yasmin, this is an entire other conversation. I'll be really happy to have the soulmate discussion. Anytime. I'm coming to LA. I'd love to see that studio. But I really do believe that when I really learned to love myself exactly as I am, I found someone who loved me exactly as I am. And I was able to love him exactly as he is. That's true unconditional love.
Oh, that's
it's
so
the
beautiful.
end of codependency.
Yes. And like you said, it benefits your relationships, your business, like starting with that self-love, self-compassion, everything is like the core to just a beautiful, loving life, whatever that looks like for you. So
that
amazing.
Begins and ends with that. Yeah, absolutely. Like Ina Garten, one day I will look back at my life and say that my only regret is that I didn't meet Ryan sooner.
Oh, so beautiful. Oh my gosh. We'll have to do another podcast on this, but Keren, it was such a joy to have you on. I feel like we jumped around talking about so many different things, and this will help so many recovering high achievers right now. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.